Hello, this is Brett from PM2 Consulting. As promised, this is just a quick overview of the work we just completed with your team at Labs that combines the work that you've done with Zone to Win, V2MOM, and OKRs. This is just a quick overview, but I apologize in advance. It may take 20 or 30 minutes to go through all this topic. But the quick executive summary is this, that the Zone to Win process allows you to create the strategies for the corporation, codify your strategy, and communicate it to the organization. From there, we take the V2MOM approach to cascade that strategy down to departments, teams, and products, and translate the strategy into operational terms. That's great, but it's still a bit too conceptual for most people to get to. So the next step is OKRs. What we do is we break that down to the specific role and responsibility. Who does what when by team or department or individual. It allows us to accurately keep score and provides that really important framework for effective performance conversations with employees and effective performance meetings for the organization. And that in turn feeds back up to Zone to Win to allow us to modify and maintain those strategies. So that's the executive overview. Let's drill through the detail. As you recall, through our strategy session, we helped you develop your strategy map. In the strategy map, we develop Labs' overall strategy beneath the mission, right? We're about energy software that accelerates the health of the planet. And obviously we've got to achieve our financial goals. And to do that, we need to make our customers happy. Our customers are, the utilities, the state, provincial, federal agencies, and the United Nations. To make our customers happy, we need the right internal processes, and to have the right processes, we need the right enablers. So obviously our overall goal is to maximize shareholder value. To do that, right now in our phase of work, it's all about driving revenue. Now, what do our customers want that allow us to increase our revenue? Well, overall, it's about the brand. And the brand has three key aspects that we have to continuously deliver on. First is we have to deliver fault-free software. The utility can never go down, and the software must always give us the right optimization equation. Secondly, we need to provide awesome customer support. The cultural and language issues are super critical, and instructions need to be understood by the user group immediately. And then finally, we need to own the next wave. We're already the market leader. We need to maintain that position. So, how do we do that? What are our internal processes to make the customers happy? Well, overall, it's about protecting, enhancing the core, that core group of services and products that we've offered over time. We have to protect that, but continuously improve it. To continuously improve it, we need to better understand the market and continue to be the market leader. And if we do that, that will enable us to protect and enhance the core. What we also need to do is to innovate and diversify our offerings. And if we do that, that's what we need to do to protect the core. Now, being the market leader and understanding the market informs what we need to do around innovate and diversify, and that in turn allows us to identify what are the transformational projects that we sponsor to drive the overall evolution of the business, and in terms of the customer, make sure that they understand we do own the next wave. Underpinning all of that are our objectives of invest in our people, live our values, and finally, leverage our intellectual property. So that's a strategy map that came out of that retreat. From there, we wanted to validate it and understand it through the Zone to Win series of frameworks and strategic objectives. So if you remember, the Zone to Win has the transformational zone for that one project that's going to take us to the next wave, performance zone about revenue, productivity zone about the back office work, and incubation zone, those projects that we're working on. So we should be able to take those objectives that we had in the strategy map and identify which zone they go in. So for example, drive revenue, clearly that fits up here in the performance zone. Maximize shareholder value, obviously, also up in the performance zone. So also in the performance zones were the objectives of build a brand, own the next wave, and finally be the market leader. On the productivity zone we had the objectives of protect and enhance the core, provide awesome customer support, deliver fault-free software, leverage our intellectual property, invest in our people, and then finally, live our core values. Our transformational project, of course, fits up in the transformational zone, and then finally, innovate and diversify is in the incubation zone. So that allowed us to validate the strategy that we came up from in the retreat, but also begin to identify which are the zones they fit into. Now, once we decided what zone we were playing or what strategy we were playing, we could prioritize these objectives. So working with the leadership team, we allocated a percentage against each of these objectives. And you can see for 2019, our priority is going to be on driving that transformational project, in this case Goldmine, continuing to incubate a couple of projects under Innovate and Diversify, such as Burger King, and then finally deliver that fault-free software towards that operational excellence. Now, next year we expect these priorities to shift, and we're going to revisit this every quarter. But for now, this is what we see for the next year. So that's how we use Zone to win. Now we need to create those OKRs. So what we did is we did what we call an ontology. Like the periodic table, understanding the relationship between, in the periodic table's case, electrons and neutrons. We could figure out what molecules should exist. The ontology, the organizing structure for your business, is the zone to win, if we list those down the left, those objectives, and your core processes across the top. So things like managing the pipeline, ideate, refine ideas, design, development, launch, tech, and so on. And what we should be able to do is score the impact of each of these processes on each of these objectives. So literally, if manage the pipeline had a critical role in supporting and enabling drive our revenue, we'd give it a 5. If it had a mediocre or moderate approach impact, we'd give it a 3. And if we had no approach, it's a blank. And the scoring we gave it looked like this. So you can see in the case of manage the pipeline, these cells, by the way, are just conditionally formatted based on the sum of the impact times the weighting. So this is 8 points, it's light gray. This here is 4 times 15 or 60, therefore it's black. And this, for example, is 2 times 15 or 30, so it's dark gray. So the darker the cell, the more important it is. Or to say it another way, these black cells are the critical performance nodes in labs. So if I'm running pipeline, I better be sure I nail C2, I1, I2, and I4. So it's clear what my contribution is to strategic success of the organization, and I know where I need to build my objectives and key results. It also informs me where I should be building my vision. Now I understand where I impact it. I can write up my vision statement, and I can take a look at this and understand how this differs in values necessary for my department in addition to those for the overall labs corporation. What it also allows us to do is understand the cross-functional nature of work. So if I look horizontally, I can see from those black nodes who needs to participate in the deliver fault-free software meetings. So we can actually give these a score. So if I add it up by column, I can see that for this period's strategy, the most important processes are launch, support, and maintain, and development, followed up by data acquisition and analysis, and manage the pipeline. I can also add it up horizontally to find out where do our process efforts need to be for success this period. So this ontology allowed us to do a bunch of things. So let's say that we're in the design team. What we should be able to do is first develop design's vision, as part of V2MOM, in accordance to these priorities. Secondly, I can then figure out what are design's objectives, again, based on those black critical performance nodes. 3, I can then develop design's additional values. What does design need in addition to our 5 core values for labs to make them successful? 4, we can then develop what are design's key results. So given these objectives, how would we measure success? So the key results are as measured by. So what are the key results, which of course doubles up for the measures in V2MOM. Then we can identify what are the design obstacles in this executing this strategy. In other words, what's going to get in the way of us achieving those key results that we identified in step 4, and that populates V2MOM. Then we can develop designs methods. What are the specific activities we're going to go do, which then allows us to clarify design's role clarity, or RACI. So who's accountable for making that black node happen? Who do we have to consult? Who do we have to inform? And that populates the cross-functional nature of work. So that is how we ended up with our V2MOM and OKRs. Now, as a reminder, the construction of OKR is straightforward. So it's a verb, a specific noun, the key result, the target, and the date. So from the call center, we had reduce customer downtime. So, once our optimization system drops for some reason, we have to get that utility up and running as quickly as possible. We have to reduce their downtime. Now, it's important that we describe the OKR as the impact for the customer. Not, for example, how you started with reduce call talk time, because there's no benefit to that. Whereas something like reduce customer downtime gives the team much more creative space to effectively solve that problem. Reducing customer downtime takes us past the call center and enables web-based support, chat boxes, peer-to-peer support, and so forth. So the key result is, the first is call to closure cycle time. And so our target is 4.5 minutes in Q1, and our target is 4 minutes in Q2, and then a miracle happens. In Q3 we get down to 2 minutes, and then we shave a bit more in Q3. So that's the objective and key results. Now, the cross-functional nature of work, as we went through that show and tell process, or the underlap activity, we identified that we needed help from HR. What we decided to do is begin training people in multiple products, so that when customers come to us, if they're running V1 and part of V3.2, we are going to have an operator that's trained in those 2 products. And all of our operators will be trained and certified in 2 products in Q1. They'll be trained and certified in 4 products by Q2. They'll be trained and certified in 6 products by Q3. And by Q4, we're going to have every operator trained and certified in all 10 products. But that's not enough. What we're also doing is we're automating the PBX, so that when a call comes in, we know what products and versions that particular customer is running on, and then we're going to route the phone to someone who's an operator who's certified those products. We're going to design it in Q1, develop it in Q2, launch it in Q3, and then stabilize in Q4. So this miracle in Q3 is not a miracle. It's because we effectively did the launch of the PBX, and we also did the training in a critical mass of products, so that we can begin to get to that step. Now, the final 10 products gets us to 1.8. So this shows the cross-functional nature of work. And so this particular project started off as one of our transformational projects, and people learned to prioritize getting this work done compared to their other work. So that's where the interconnection is between OKRs and the zone to win concepts of transformational projects. So that looks great, but what we haven't talked about is how we add in projects, or what Geoffrey Moore calls programs. So what that looks like, if we go back to that ontology, and instead of just looking at the impact, we also score its performance. So a performance of 5 out of 5 means I'm meeting expectations. 4 out of 5 means I'm slightly behind target, but I can achieve it with the resources I'm given. I just have to focus. And a performance, below that is a 2 or 3. So now we can begin using this ontology to, grade our performance. So in this example, the strategy points available are the 8% weighting times the 5 impact out of 5, and the maximum we could have got is 5 out of 5 on performance, which means there's 200 strategy points at play. Unfortunately, we're not performing at a 5, we're performing at a 2. So the math says 8 times 5 times 2 is 80. In other words, there's a performance gap of 120 strategy points. And at 120, we color this red. If I go down to the next one, that has a weighting of 7, impact of 5, maximum performance is 5, 175 strategy points at play. We're performing at a 4, so it ends up we've only earned 140 strategy points, which means there's a delta of 35 strategy points, and that's what makes it turn yellow or amber. So what we can begin doing is color grading our performance based on strategic importance. So a 4 is not always red. It can be in some cases, but it could be a yellow or it could be green based on the weighting of the objectives. And so this mathematics allows us to begin to figure out where in our business do we have to improve performance in order to be successful. And it also allows us to sort of look horizontally. So we normally look inside of our department. So, green is going to think everything is, or development is going to think everything is tickety-boo fine because they're all green. Whereas, validate might be concerned only about this one, innovate and diversify. But if I add these up horizontally, so, we ignore the lower, anything scored as an impact less than 4, we ignore. These are our, again, critical performance nodes. If we add it up horizontally, we create this graph. So just to show this, I explain how we use it. The height of the bar, if you remember, shows the total amount of process support we need for success. The blue portion represents how well we're currently performing, and the gold portion is a gap between current performance and what the strategy calls for. So what you can see here is, for example, Drive's transformation is going to require a whole bunch of processes to enable success. And it has a good gap on it, but there's a bigger gap around innovation and, a teeny gap around, for example, build a brand. So looking at the project's goal is to close those gold performance areas. So if I ignore the blue part, that's what we need our projects to focus on. So we go back to Zone to Win, and we should be able to place our projects on this grid. So for example, the project of implementing Salesforce is a performance zone, right? That's driving sales. Our launch OKRs is also a performance zone project. On productivity zone, we have the ERP system and the on-demand employee training. In incubation, we have 3 projects in incubation, right? We've got Goldmine, Burger King, and Sabre. Now, as we had our discussion, we decided that Burger King and Lightsaber were still in the incubation phase, but this year we're going to accelerate Goldmine up to be our transformational project. So now that we've used the Zone to Win framework to take a look at the projects, or what he calls programs, we should be able to do an ontology where we put the projects across the top. So the productivity zone projects, we had more, but we're just highlighting 2 here. Performance zone projects, highlighting the top 2, incubation zone, the top 2, and that transformational project of Goldmine. And we should be able to score the impact of each of these projects against these objectives, right? So, in fact, again, we can do the same thing. We can add up those scores by strategic objective. And remember, we're doing those projects to close those performance bars. So if we take a look at the cumulative impact of our project portfolio, we do have lots of projects against transformation. We have projects against drive revenue, a little bit around maximize market share and so forth. So once we've got those projects quantified, we can actually compare those 2 charts. And this is what we saw. We saw that, in fact, we have a large gap on Innovate and not many projects. And no gap, for example, on Own the Next Wave, yet we got a bunch of projects there. And it's possible that we're also over-allocating our focus on deliver fault-free software. So this misalignment of our projects allowed us to have a conversation about what projects we're going to return to inventory and which ones we're going to get prioritized. So if we go back to the ontology for the projects, what we can do for any one project is obviously add that to design's objectives, their OKR work. Secondly, add whatever the impact and performance of this project is into their key results. And then add in who owns what part of this project. And that way we get around the conflict when I show up for my transformational project and I don't have any resources from the ongoing run the business activities. So the ontology allowed us to add the projects into the OKR system as well. Finally, we enabled this through software. Now, if you remember, you chose Workboard, which allowed us to begin giving you views of the organization-wide performance so that we could begin to see which departments were achieving their objectives, which were slightly behind, and which were significantly behind. It also gave us a view in more detail for each department. So each department, we could build our overall business scorecard, including how we're doing on the metrics, what our objectives are and how we're performing, what are the work streams that we have, the hot box of what risks are going on, and what deliverables we're pushing towards. We could also drill that down to the department and team level. We chose not to take it to the personal level, but at some point in time you could do so that now I've got my own scorecard. We can also drill through from the top through the organization so we can see what everyone in the organization's OKRs are and how they're performing on it. So it allows us to run the overall business either by objective or by organization. The final part was enable this through more effective meetings. Now, the more effective meetings fit into 3 strata: tactical meetings, operational meetings, and strategic meetings. The tactical meetings, think of those as your daily scrum or weekly meetings, where you spend about 80% of your time reviewing performance, about 20% talking action. Those go on every single week. Once a month, we're going to get together and spend less time on action and performance to create time to talk about implications. So at the departmental level, what's the implications of what we're seeing and how do we reallocate resources within the current organization chart? That goes on every single month. The new meeting you added in was this strategic meeting, where we're going to take a look at the performance and the existing strategy, touch on performance, touch on implications, but spend a lot of time reviewing the strategic issues. We're going to go back and take a look at the zones to win, decide do we want to shift the weighting, do we want to shift projects from zone to zone, do we want to drop stuff off? And metaphorically, we're going to change the zone to win architecture or the strategy map. Now, the following quarter, we use that new strategy map to run that quarter. We get together, we have the same meeting, and I may change my zone to win again. So this is how we began to produce the agility in the organization that we're looking for. This allows us to have 4 learning cycles where we used to have just 1. And also allows us to do nifty things like, if you remember when we launched that project in Nigeria and then did the acquisition, we could run this session in the middle of that quarter to understand what the implications of that were and allow people to get reprioritized around the integration. So that's the meeting cycle, and within those meetings, certainly for the bottom 2, the run the business meetings, we agreed on a standard format to run those meetings. If you remember, that format has 5 sections. Every time we get together, we spend some time level setting, understand the barriers and blockages, or what in the V2MOM framework we call obstacles. We problem solve, we escalate, and we close. And the problem solve is an iterative process. Each problem goes through and gets solved before we move on to the next one. So the specific steps inside of every meeting are as follows. In level set, we do 3 steps. View from the top, so the boss tells us their view based on the strategy map or the OKRs. View from the bottom, so their direct reports describe what they see from their perspective. And then follow-ups. What are the action items we agreed to in the last meeting and were they accomplished? Based on that conversation, we can agree on what are the obstacles or barriers and blockages. And so we're going to review those. And of course, as we know from the obstacles, they're either inputs, process issues, or people issues. And we're going to identify which are those which remain to be dealt with and what are the associated OKRs. For each of those, we go through the problem solve cycle, discover, discuss, decide. So the SMEs come in, tell us what's going on, help us understand the issue. The team discusses it and eventually decides on what the actions are. There are some we can't solve. They get escalated to either cross-functional meeting, department meeting, or leadership, executive leadership, and then finally close. We agree on the action items. And we agreed that the important thing is to time bind these. So for the daily meeting, we only deal with problems we can solve in a minute. At the weekly meeting, it's problems we can solve in 15 minutes. At the monthly meeting, it's problems we can solve in 30 minutes. So we grade the problem based on the amount of time it should take us to solve and how important that issue is, and we escalate it and move it around to the right meeting. So that's the overall framework that we came up with. I hope this reminds you of how we integrated the Zone to Win, V2MOM, and OKRs at Labs, and we look forward to having the continued conversation as we coach you through the series of meetings over the next 3 quarters. Thanks for your time.